hppodcraft.com.
Searchers after horror haunt strange, far places. For them are the catacombs of Ptolemaeus and the carven mausolea of the nightmare countries. They climb to the moonlit towers of ruined Rhine castles and falter down black cobwebbed steps beneath the scattered stones of forgotten cities in Asia. The haunted wood and the desolate mountain are their shrines, and they linger around the sinister monoliths on uninhabited islands. But the true epicure of the terrible, to whom a new thrill of unutterable ghastliness is the chief end and justification of existence, esteems most of all the ancient lonely farmhouses of backwoods New England. For there, the dark elements of strength, solitude, grotesqueness, and ignorance combine to form the perfection of the hideous.
Wow.
That is a comment about New England.
Yes, it is. And that is the greatest opening paragraph one could wish for right before Halloween.
Oh, yes.
If one were doing a podcast about a horror writer.
I think you are right.
Yes.
You who are
Chad Pfeiffer.
And I, who am Chris Lackey, am agreeing with you, because this is the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
That's right. It is a podcast about a horror writer here at hppodcraft.com.
And this week's story is one of my favorites, almost, called The Picture in the House.
Yes, and it's one of my favorites, too. In fact, we talked about this earlier. When I was in college, I memorized this whole story.
He memorized this whole story.
For a class I had to do.
Is blowing my mind that you could memorize this whole story,
well,
especially when...
Yeah, the crazy dialect part.
The crazy dialect part.
Well, it obviously, as soon as I performed it, it left my brain, because when I was rereading it...
You couldn't even remember.
Nothing was retained.
Oh.
Speaking of strange, far places, I was just in New Orleans for the weekend.
Oh, yes. The Ward, our television pilot, premiered at the film festival.
That's right, and got some pretty good reception there. And in fact, a couple people listened to the show, showed up, which was great.
We had actual listeners come to the screening to meet you.
Yeah. I specifically want to call out Dada Voodoo on the message board. His name's Christian. Thanks so much for coming. He brought some presents. He had some audio recordings. He brought me in a comic book. I mean,
awesome.
It's so great.
Awesome.
All I had to give him was the movie that he was already there to watch. So hopefully, today's show is dedicated to you, Christian.
Oh, right, yeah.
But it's an old city compared to the rest of the U.S. So I was thinking about this. I was reading the story as I was there, and thinking about what that kind of decrepitude can do to a place. And there are these strange buildings, and you wonder who lived there, who's living there now. It doesn't really look like it's in good repair. I felt a little like a vampire when I was walking around.
Did you think of Sting songs?
Yeah, totally. I was thinking of Bloodletting by Concrete Blonde.
Concrete Blonde, yeah.
And I felt like I was in an Anne Rice book, although as I got on the plane, I was like, nobody would ever buy a book called The Vampire Chad. Just wouldn't happen.
Now, I believe that you were telling me a story, Chad, that even though it was like being in a vampire novel, your experience had much more vomit than your typical vampire
Yeah, a lot more vomit and a lot more of urine and a lot of beads and boobage. Boobs. That's a technical term, boobage.
Yeah, boobage.
Yeah.
Well, wow, that sounds like you had a wonderful time.
I had a wonderful time in New Orleans,
which
I got, the transition is just that it's an old city. So are the cities in New England.
Now, actually, when we were in Vermont...
yes, you were just in Vermont.
We were just in Vermont with the Whisper in Darkness shoot, and it's surprising how rural Vermont is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really the boonies. It's thick, wooded hills, and the roads are, often not labeled, and there are quite a few still... houses that are really tucked away from the road, and are kind of overgrown and covered, and it's surprising. I don't think it's really changed that much. It was pretty creepy.
I think that's why so many horror writers root their stories in New England. I mean, a lot of like Lovecraft and Stephen King, obviously they live there, so it's what they know. But just in general, it's such a great environment for horror tales and ghost stories.
Absolutely.
So anyway, let's get into the story.
Let's do that.
Most horrible of all sights are the little unpainted wooden houses remote from traveled ways, usually squatted upon some damp, grassy slope or leaning against some gigantic outcropping of rock. In such houses have dwelt generations of strange people whose like the world has never seen.
Lovecraft here is obviously just setting a location, setting a place.
Yeah.
And it's a place I don't think probably most people, even before I went to Vermont, I really never saw much of this.
Right.
And so he's just saying, hey, you know what? Out in the world, there are these types of places.
Yeah.
And it's not typical. Usually stories like this horror stories take place in castles,
right.
Like in Eastern Europe, or just more Gothic.
Yes, Gothic settings.
Gothic settings,
and then he has a strange line of logic that he comes from too, which I like. In this paragraph, he goes on to say that this is where the Puritans settled, but because of their sort of fanatical beliefs, or what was considered fanatical beliefs by their oppressors, they wanted to be in the wilderness. They wanted to be away from everybody. But the Puritans also have the sense of shame, in which they don't want to share what they do in their homes with one another. They want to keep things hidden, and because of their being cut off from civilization and their oppressive tendencies, they kind of get crazier and crazier in their habits.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love the line in there. He says they cowered in an appalling slavery to the dismal phantasms of their own minds.
Yeah, that's great.
So basically, they're these rural people out in these houses, isolated.
For generations. They've just, they haven't been in contact with the outside world.
And they live in those houses that we mentioned before.
It was to a time-battered edifice of this description that I was driven one afternoon in November 1896 by a rain of such chilling copiousness that any shelter was preferable to exposure. I had been traveling for some time amongst the people of the Miskatonic Valley in quest of certain genealogical data, and from the remote, devious, and problematical nature of my course had deemed it convenient to employ a bicycle despite the lateness of the season. Now I found myself upon an apparently abandoned road, which I had chosen as the shortest cut to Arkham. Overtaken by the storm at a point far from any town, and confronted with no refuge save the antique and repellent wooden building which blinked with bleared windows from between two huge leafless elms near the foot of a rocky hill.
Whoa, what's that?
There's some firsts here, huh?
This is the first mention of the Miskatonic Valley and Arkham.
Yeah.
So we are stepping into, for the first time, Lovecraft country.
That's right. Welcome to Lovecraft country. So our scholar's out there riding his bike around.
He's riding his bike around, and he's looking for genealogical information. So basically, who's a descendant of who, and
exactly
pretty scholarly, activity. Not too exciting, really.
I do think he probably popped a few wheelies while he was on that bike.
He could have.
He doesn't like the look of this house he stopped at all. He says it stares at him kind of hauntingly and slyly.
So, but he's in this rainstorm, and he's got it's coming down really hard, and he's got to stop. He needs some shelter from the rain.
When I was reading that paragraph, and he does say that it stares at him slyly and hauntingly, I think, Lovecraft never met an adverb he didn't like. He uses them so much, and sometimes it's shocking to me because they just beat that out of you in creative writing class. Do not use adverbs. Use good verbs. Don't describe all of your verbs. And he does it so much. But it's almost indulgent. It's like eating frosting. I just love it, When he says something happened chillingly or hauntingly, it's funny.
I mean, he gets to do it. He's Lovecraft.
I know, that's right.
That's what you want that. Sometimes you want that.
So our guy thinks the house is deserted because it's overgrown, and as most of these backwood places are. But the windows aren't broken. So, he knocks.
Yeah.
There's no answer. And he enters.
He goes in with his bike.
Which he leans against the wall. And I don't like to talk about Call of Cthulhu too much on this because there's other excellent podcasts that cover that game. But the description when he walks in, it's just like playing a game because it says, he walked in the door, he shut it. There were 2 rooms to the left. There were 2, right. You know what I mean? There's a staircase in front of you, and there's a stairwell going down, And then the protagonist even says he decided to open, the left door.
The left door, yeah.
And that's where he went in, and then he kind of makes a spot hidden roll and sees everything that's in the room,
It totally, it really did feel that way.
So he goes into this room on the left.
Yes, which is kind of a parlor or sitting room.
Right,
of some kind,
and everything in there is a pre-revolutionary antique.
Yeah, so he was saying if you were a collector that you would be stoked to find this place.
Yeah. But it creeps him out.
It's too creepy.
He says,
something in the whole atmosphere seemed redolent of unhallowed age, of unpleasant crudeness, and of secrets which should be forgotten. I felt disinclined to sit down, and wandered about examining the various articles which I had noticed. The first object of my curiosity was a book of medium size lying upon the table and presenting such an antediluvian aspect that I marveled at beholding it outside a museum or library.
Always a bad idea if you are in an old cottage and you find a book.
Yeah.
Don't open it.
It's bad.
If there's a tape recorder next to it, especially don't play that.
Don't play that tape recorder.
Of course, this isn't the Necronomicon.
When I opened it to the title page, my wonder grew even greater, for it proved to be nothing less rare than Pigafetta's account of the Congo region, written in Latin from the notes of the sailor Lopez and printed at Frankfurt in 1598. I had often heard of this work, with its curious illustrations by the brothers de Bry, hence for a moment forgot my uneasiness in my desire to turn the pages before me. The engravings were indeed interesting, drawn wholly from imagination and careless descriptions, and represented Negroes with white skins and Caucasian features. Nor would I soon have closed the book had not an exceedingly trivial circumstance upset my tired nerves and revived my sensation of disquiet. What annoyed me was merely the persistent way in which the volume tended to fall open of itself at plate 12, which represented in gruesome detail a butcher's shop of the cannibal Anziques. I experienced some shame at my susceptibility to so slight a thing, but the drawing nevertheless disturbed me, especially in connection with some adjacent passages descriptive of Anzique gastronomy.
Oh.
Wonder what what do they eat that's so peculiar?
I wonder what they're eating. So, well, I mean, the image is of a man who looks Anglo, but he's supposed to be African, and he is chopping up a human arm or thigh, and there are body parts hanging behind him, and there's a head on the.
Now, as you say that, you're looking at a book.
I am looking at a book. I'm actually looking at more annotated H.P. Lovecraft, Joshi's, Peter Cannon, also an S.T. Joshi. They actually have. This is what surprised me, and I always thought that this wasn't real, but this is a real book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Pigafetta's account of the Congo region, and
it's called Regnum Congo.
Yeah, Regnum Congo. And according to Joshi, Lovecraft found out about this book from Thomas Henry Huxley, and he wrote about this book in Man's Place in Nature and other anthropological essays. So some of his descriptions in the story are actually incorrect because he never saw the original.
So he knows about the book from an account from somebody else, but you've actually got.
I've got the picture,
and let me see. It's actually somebody chopping up a human body.
But it's accurate. I mean, they do look like he almost looks like kind of a Greek man. I would say he's got a little tunic that he's wearing around his waist and stuff. We're going to post this on our Facebook page.
All right.
This picture so you can take a look at it for yourself.
Hopefully it doesn't give you unnatural urges. Yeah. Like the man we're about to meet.
Yeah.
So our protagonist keeps browsing the room. He finds some other works of literature there, and then he hears footsteps, heavy footsteps upstairs. They come down the steps, and someone lifts the latch on the doorway.
In the doorway stood a person of such singular appearance that I should have exclaimed aloud but for the restraints of good breeding. Old, white-bearded, and ragged, my host possessed a countenance and physique which inspired equal wonder and respect.
He's this very tall old man.
Yeah.
And he looks stouter and less wrinkled than he should for his age. Mm-hmm. Lovecraft says he could even look distinguished if he weren't so unkempt.
For his age, he looked much younger, probably from, good exercise.
Good exercise regimen, probably good
diet. Maybe?
Yeah, probably.
Maybe diet?
Well, so when he sees him, he expects to be run off the property, obviously.
Oh, yeah, because he just walked into this guy's house. But the guy, he just motions with his hand for him to sit down.
He's got all this hospitality.
Yeah, boom.
Yeah, he doesn't run him, get off my lawn.
Get out of my parlor.
Yeah, none of that.
Quit looking at my cannibal books.
Lovecraft describes his dialect as an extreme and very antiquated Yankee dialect, and when he writes the guy's dialogue, he writes it phonetically to express that.
Which some people were doing at the time. Like in the 20s when he was writing that, it was sort of a popular thing to be writing phonetically.
Yeah, Stephen King does it now, too. And some people don't like it, but I do. It can be a tough thing to puzzle out.
Yeah.
But it does force you to kind of wrap your mouth around the words and say them and hear that accent. It's forcing you to.
I have to say, the other night I was reading this to Rachel, and she could not stop laughing when I was reading it out loud. So it kind of had the opposite effect.
Well,
I thought it was pretty creepy when I read it.
We're in good hands today because luckily we have
Andrew Leman.
Andrew Leman is back to read for us.
"Catched in the rain, be ye?" he greeted. "Glad ye was nigh the house and had the sense to come right in. I calculate I was asleep outside I heard ye. I ain't as young as I used to be, and I need a powerful sight of naps nowadays. Traveling fur, I ain't seen many folks along this road since they took off the Arkham stage."
Every time I do hear something that sounds vaguely like a New England accent, though, I think of Fred Gwynn from Pet Sematary.
Oh, the old Micmac burial ground.
Yeah, exactly. Soil of a man's heart is stonier.
Sometimes that is better.
Exactly. So, the protagonist apologizes to the guy, "Sorry, I'm in your house." But old man, he starts chatting him up. He hasn't seen anybody for a while.
Yeah.
He says,
"Guess you hail from Boston, don't ye?" I never been there, but I can tell a town man when I see him. We had one for district schoolmaster in '84, but he quit sudden and no one never heard on him since. Here the old man lapsed into a kind of chuckle and made no explanation when I questioned him.
In horror, there's like this unwritten rule. It's almost like when somebody breaks wind, you know, he who smelt it dealt it. Like, if somebody tells you, oh yeah, nobody's seen that schoolmaster for a long time.
Nobody knows what happened to him.
And nobody knows what happened to him. Yeah.
And he laughs.
Come on, guys. So the protagonist decides, hey, this guy's nice.
Yeah, he feels a little bit initially afraid, and he feels a little bit more comfortable around this guy. He's like, oh, he's a nice old guy.
Exactly.
A little weird, but all right. He's let me hang out in his home while it rains.
Yeah. So what can I chat him up about? Hey,
what's this book?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that African book? Captain Ebenezer Holt traded me that in '68, him as was killed in the war. He got this in London, I guess. He used to like to buy things at the shops. I was up to his house once on the hill trading horses when I see this book. I relished the pictures, so he give it in on a swap. 'Tis a queer book. Here, leave me get on my spectacles. The old man fumbled among his rags, producing a pair of dirty and amazingly antique glasses with small octagonal lenses and steel bows. Ebenezer could read a little of this. 'Tis Latin, but I can't. I had 2 or 3 schoolmasters read me a bit, and Parson Clark, him they say got drowned in the pond. Can you make anything out in it?
Him they say got drowned in the pond.
Him they say got drowned in the pond.
Strange that he would mention that as well.
Yeah, it's really... Yeah, it's creepy.
Creepy.
As much as we're giving a little bit of a hard time, when I'm reading this, I'm into it.
I'm giving it. Well, you're right. We are being
giving a hard time.
We're treating it a little funny, but only because I love it so much. I mean, and it really does creep me out when I think about the environment of the storm.
Oh yeah.
The rain coming down outside, and he's in this little room alone with this book with this old man. It is genuinely creepy.
It's creepy.
The first time
it's really creepy.
So our guy translates a little of the Latin, and the old man is really amused by it. Almost has this kind of childlike
glee. Yeah, he's really excited by how this guy just lights up when he's reading, translating the Latin.
Although he is quick to say, all right, let's stop reading and look at the pictures.
Oh yes,
because he says queer how pictures can set a body thinking.
Yeah.
So he shows him a few. There's some half monkey, half men pictures. There's a dragon with the head of an alligator. The half monkey, half men pictures reminded me a bit of Arthur German.
Oh, go on, maybe
some of this is because that was kind of by the Congo where that ancient.
It could be, but then again, Picfetta, when he did this book, he got it from other guys. Like
right,
he wasn't the actual guy that did the searching.
Yeah, there's a telephone game with the information in this book.
Yeah, it's like Ken Hite actually brings it up in Tour de Lovecraft, where he talks about how this story is actually 8 levels or 9 levels deep. I don't have it right in front of me at the moment, but he breaks it down like, okay, well, this guy told this guy who told this guy who told this guy, this guy.
Exactly.
And if you want to add in the fact that Lovecraft got it from a guy
who
wrote about the thing, it's even one deeper.
Hilarious. Despite all of these fantastic images in there, there's one that this old man likes quite a bit. He says,
but now I'll show you the best one. Over here nigh the middle. The old man's speech grew a trifle thicker, and his eyes assumed a brighter glow. But his fumbling hands, though seemingly clumsier than before, were entirely adequate to their mission. The book fell open, almost of its own accord, and as if from frequent consultation at this place, to the repellent 12th plate, showing a butcher's shop amongst the Anzique cannibals. My sense of restlessness returned, though I did not exhibit it. The especially bizarre thing was that the artist had made his Africans look like white men. The limbs and quarters hanging about the walls of the shop were ghastly, while the butcher with his axe was hideously incongruous. But my host seemed to relish the view as much as I disliked it.
So, yeah, this is the image that we discussed earlier. It's kind of a Caucasian-looking African.
And the old man says that, he's read scripture before, or he's heard scripture, but he couldn't imagine the images of any of the slaughter.
Yeah.
But here, it's all laid out for him to look at.
Yeah. Well, he came up with that on his own, but now it's here.
It
gets a body to thinking.
Here a body can see all there is to it. I suppose 'tis sinful, but ain't we all born and living in sin? That fella being chopped up gives me a tickle every time I look at him. I have to keep looking at him. See where the butcher cut off his feet? There's his head on that bench with one arm side of it and t'other arm's on the ground side of the meat block.
How he describes the picture is creepy enough, but it's when he says, I have to keep looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, he becomes obsessed with this picture. Obviously, he's been looking at it a lot.
Yeah, it just reminds me of criminals like focusing over some image before they go out and do something really horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, the core of this is genuinely terrifying.
Yeah. It feels very real.
Yeah, at that moment.
Yeah.
The man is getting more and more excited as he talks about it, which makes our guy pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, his comfort that he was feeling at the beginning is melting away quickly.
Which the old guy notices because he says,
As I says, 'tis queer how pictures set you thinking. Once I tried something funny. Here, young sir, don't get scared. All I done was to look at the picture afore I killed the sheep for market. Killing sheep was kind of more fun out of looking at it.
So he says, don't get scared. I imagine that he went, oh.
The guy maybe started visibly shaking,
Exactly.
I think I would be,
Scared.
Scared.
Yeah.
I'd be scared.
So the wind and the rain picks up outside as the man whispers to him more about this photo. More about this engraving. The approaching thunder is really doing a number, but the old man doesn't notice. He just keeps on.
Killing sheep was kind of more fun, but t'want quite satisfying. Queer how craving gets a hold on you. As ye love the Almighty, young man, don't tell nobody, but I swear to God that picture begun to make me hungry for victuals I couldn't raise nor buy. Here, sit still, what's ailing you? I didn't do nothing, only I wondered how 'twould be if I did. They say meat makes blood and flesh and gives you new life, so I wondered if 'twouldn't make a man live longer and longer if 'twas more the same.
Oh my goodness.
He's talking about some like Elizabeth Bathory stuff there, if you eat flesh, if you cannibalize, it'll make you younger and younger.
Right, it's just very typical in a lot of like the vampire myths and the Wendigo myth.
Right.
It's that eating human
that
flesh.
That is the Wendigo myth, isn't it?
Yeah,
if Wendigos are people who have cannibalized.
Yeah, and then you become like an evil spirit gets in your body. And it's sort of like a kind of a monster. It's kind of a cross between a werewolf myth and a vampire myth. It's its own thing. It's a Native American mythology.
Well, the beauty secret's working on this guy because as was described earlier, as was hinted at, he looks a little younger than he should. But before the old man can go on much longer with his very, very creepy art appreciation lecture, something very strange happens to interrupt.
The open book lay flat between us, with the picture staring repulsively upward. As the old man whispered the words, "More the same," a tiny spattering impact was heard, and something showed on the yellowed paper of the upturned volume. I thought of the rain and of a leaky roof. But rain is not red. On the butcher's shop of the Anzique cannibals, a small red spattering glistened picturesquely, lending vividness to the horror of the engraving. The old man saw it and stopped whispering even before my expression of horror made it necessary. Saw it and glanced quickly toward the floor of the room he had left an hour before. I followed his glance and beheld just above us on the loose plaster of the ancient ceiling a large irregular spot of wet crimson, which seemed to spread even as I viewed it. I did not shriek or move, but merely shut my eyes.
And that's the end of the story.
Oh, no, it's not.
Oh, no!
No, it's not. Yeah, I really wish it was the end of the story because that is awesome. That is a creepy end of the story.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good job, H.P. Lovecraft.
Really good.
But no, there's one more sentence.
One sentence left.
A moment later came the titanic thunderbolt of thunderbolts.
blasting that accursed house of unutterable secrets and bringing the oblivion which alone saved my mind.
It's the cleansing blast of thunder is back.
Wow.
Blast of lightning, rather.
Blast of lightning. That's the end of the story.
Then that's the end of the story.
That's the end of the story.
It's funny. I read this when I was in high school, and I blocked that part out somehow. I read the last paragraph, and I did assume it just stopped with the blood hitting the page.
Really?
Yeah, and I talked to a friend, and he said, "Oh no, then lightning hits the house," and I was like, "That's ridiculous."
And then you went back and read it, and you're like, "Wait, lightning hits the house." Yeah, I've got to say that this story is super creepy and feels real. I really felt like I was there, and I could smell the guy and see him, but I gotta say that last sentence, like, what the hell, man? Like, why? What do you need that?
I have to feel that it's almost amateurishly a way to bring a definite end to the story. I can't fade out. I gotta put some kind of, button on it.
But it feels like it's just a ridiculous, totally out of nowhere Deus Ex Machina.
I mean, I guess it's not. There was a storm, but yeah, Deus Ex Machina is what it is, and I hate that almost always, unless it is literally a god coming out of a machine. That I would pay to see.
Cool. That'd be pretty neat. I gotta say that I really dig this story.
I love it.
It just feels real. Like there's just something about it. Like all of those stories I've heard about serial killers and about it just feels. And that stuff wasn't happening or wasn't reported about at the time. There's I feel like Lovecraft really tapped into something.
Yeah, he did. He hadn't seen, because every, as you say, serial killer movie, there's that moment in the third act when they find the house and all of the notebooks, and usually there's a bunch of things pinned up to the wall that they've been staring at.
Sure, right.
The informational scene. But you're right. I mean, at the time,
yeah, no way.
He was thinking about something very real, a personality problem, and an obsession
an obsession that it feels like, and of course this is totally speculation, that maybe Lovecraft had some similar, not to, but maybe something that he really enjoyed. Maybe it was pornography, or maybe it was
everybody has that happen to them at some point where you see something and you can't stop looking at it because it elicits.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And pornography is probably the best example.
Yeah, it's just because that's the one that you're not supposed to look at.
Exactly.
And that's why
so you're compelled to look at it. I'm actually doing that right now. You can't tell, but
what? You're looking at pornography?
Or even, if you see a book with photos of crime scenes, or or gosh, I was just watching Curb Your Enthusiasm the other day. I think it was in the 6th season when he has the Book of Freaks that he tries to give Ted Danson, and then John McEnroe gets it later, and they're all just looking at this Book of Freaks. They can't stop looking at it.
Yeah. I do remember that.
Startling and forbidden images do invite compulsion.
Yeah, and it seems like Lovecraft had some personal experience with that. What that was, I don't know, and probably we'll never know. But it feels like it comes from a very real place, and that's what makes this story extra creepy.
It's also got a great. You made a point earlier that the setting is non-kind of gothic horror, but it does have the great conceit of somebody out in a place they don't know. The storm comes down, and so they have to find shelter.
Yeah. But I think what's cool about it is that Lovecraft is saying, "Hey, this stuff is in our backyard." You know what I mean? This is not, over in Eastern Europe on the other side of the world or in deep jungles of the Congo. This is like just down the street outside of town. This stuff is going on.
Yeah.
And that's pretty creepy.
And it has that moment at the end, which is actually in slasher movies. I love more than the creative, crazy kills. What I love more is the discovery of the body by the protagonist. That scene right before. And sometimes if it's like a Friday the 13th movie, it happens all at once. There's a bunch of discoveries.
Oh, right. Yeah,
they open the cabinet and they all fall out.
And then they stumble back, and then there's
right behind them. Yeah, and it just drops out of the ceiling suddenly. And it's always like, it's so ridiculous. The killer would have had to actually spend some time,
Oh, right. Like an orchestrating, kind of a Rube Goldberg device.
Oh, right. Like at the beginning of Goonies when the bowling ball, or Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the bowling ball comes in here and then the eggs go down.
They had Goonies too and stuff like that.
I would love it, listeners, if you could think of. I wish there were more coming to me, but if you could think of from your favorite slasher movies what the most ridiculous discovery of the victim is.
Yeah, that would be
awesome.
Please
write in for
Please
that.
Write in.
I would love to hear it.
Some background on this particular story.
Yes, please.
It was written in December 12th, 1920, and for the record, we sort of skipped ahead a little bit.
Yes, we switched some things around.
We switched things around because next week we're going to do a double header with Nyarlathotep and
the Crawling Chaos. Yeah.
So we just kind of want to put those two together because they're sort of related.
Yeah.
And this one actually comes after Nyarlathotep. Anyway, so this was written in December 12th, 1920, but it was first published in the July 1919 issue of National Amateur.
Which came out late then, obviously.
Obviously, it came out very late, because the story was written after because it was actually published in 1921.
Gotcha.
But
okay.
I guess they really fell behind on their issues. Some other interesting tidbits.
The catacombs of Ptolemy that he talked about.
Oh, right, yeah.
What is that?
Well, Christians used to be the first Christian cemeteries were called Ptolemies, after the first pharaohs.
Oh, okay. So there are these. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, reading that first paragraph, I'm like, I want to go haunt these strange places. What are they? Actually, that opening paragraph kind of made me think of ghost hunters or something like that. People who are they search after creepy places because they just want to go sit in them and absorb them. So they would find themselves in these old Christian cemeteries, which are probably these little necropolises, or it says sinister monoliths on uninhabited islands, which.
Oh, right. That's
probably referring to Easter Island.
Easter Island or something like that.
Big, yeah.
People also compared the end of this, which is one of my notes here that I forgot about, to the end of The Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah. Which also has a big kind of blast of lightning at the end of it.
Yeah. Which I think is used to much better effect in the...
That's a great story.
All the House of Usher than this, but I think Lovecraft has already established himself as a user of cleansing bolts of lightning. So I think if he did steal this from Poe, he stole it a long time ago. Because he can't get enough of those cleansing bolts of lightning.
I mean, I'll tell you, there are things. I mean, and I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure you could do a Lovecraft story generator online or something that would have some of these dominant elements he uses a lot.
Yeah.
But you read the story, and it really isn't about that italicized last line.
Oh, not at all.
Or that opening paragraph that makes a large statement about cosmic indifference. It's in the details. It's in the writing. It's in the moments. And I could read, I mean, we've gone through some of these stories, and they do, to an extent, seem like they cover some of the same ground over and over. But each one does offer a fresh, horrible look at something.
Absolutely. And that's why I think Lovecraft is so popular this day. There's just so much to keep, and that's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Is to kind of go through it and dig it and find the really, the gems.
I mean, it's like if you love if there's a rock band you like, well, most of their songs probably do sound similar. That's the continuity.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
They use a lot of the same elements, but how do they use them? And how do they play with them?
Sure. Absolutely. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to find those things that are cool and special.
Yeah. Well, if I haven't said it enough, I really like the story, and it creeps me out.
I love the story.
I think it was...
Despite the last sentence.
Yeah, and it's such an excellent, good Halloween story.
It is a good Halloween story.
And with that, I want to wish everybody in the audience a happy, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, folks. And I want to thank Andrew Leman. Again, I'm glad to have him back.
Great job.
Great job, Andrew. And with that, I am Chris Lackey.
I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
And this is the HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
HPPodcraft.com.
HPPodcraft.com.